BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello and welcome to the Scottish Football Podcast, bringing you all the news, views and analysis you need as we hurtle into another hectic weekend. It's Friday the 15th of March. I'm Jane Lewis and here's what's coming up.
Di Maria's flicked it forward, opportunity for Benfica. Rafa Silva's in and he scores! Rafa Silva's 18th of the season breaks Rangers' hearts here.
Benfica beat the Blues. Rangers are out of Europe. Also, it's another big weekend in the Scottish Premiership.
Slips, come back to Shankland, goal! Lawrence Shankland, no doubt about this one!
Can Celtic bounce back from defeat in their last league game? Also,
we're in trouble. We've got a massive game on Saturday, but the games are running out.
Can ailing Aberdeen muster a much-needed win, or will Motherwell pile on the misery? And ahead of an Old Firm derby, we hear why it could be a make-or-break weekend in the SWPL.
This is the Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Sports Scotland.
Well, Gemma Fay, former Scotland goalkeeper, and Rory Loy, former Rangers and Dundee striker, are with us for this podcast. All good with you guys? Raring to go?
Yes, all good, Jane.
Good stuff. Lots to get through with Gemma and Rory, but before all that, let's quickly run through the latest Scottish football headlines. After seeing his side exit Europe, Rangers boss Philippe Clement insists his team are still growing and continue to improve. He also says that he was proud of his players, saying that Benfica were a team Rangers couldn't have competed with 5 months ago. Scottish Premiership winners' guaranteed access to the Champions League is under threat for the season after next. If Czech side Victoria Plzeň avoid defeat in either of their next Europa Conference League ties, Scotland will miss out. And Celtic have said no to J-League team Kashima Antlers' approach for defender Jacobi Yashi. The 23-year-old was signed by Ange Postecoglou and has yet to play for current boss Brendan Rodgers.
The Scottish Football Podcast.
Well, let's start with last night's game at Ibrox. Rory, a second-half goal by Rafa Silva proved to be the difference between the teams on a horrible rainy night at Ibrox. What did you make of it?
I thought it was a very open game, especially in the first half, and Rangers just lacked a little bit of a cutting edge up front. I thought, generally speaking, they did okay in the game without creating too many kind of clear-cut chances. But for me, the biggest thing across the two legs, Jane, was once Benfica got their noses in front, their game management was superb. They didn't waste a pass. They took the sting out of Rangers' attacks. And with the quality they had in their team, they were able to do that. You look at Rangers in the first leg over there, they scored twice, get pegged back twice. Their game management wasn't as good as Benfica's, and I just felt like once Benfica scored, that their game management, as I said, and just the way they handled that was so much better than how Rangers handled it over there. So I do think over the two legs, the best team went through, probably with the right scoreline. There wasn't much in the game, so one goal in it. But I just think in the final third, I know Cyril Dessers has come under a little bit of pressure. At times, he has scored a lot of goals, but I just think in the big moments, in the big games, such as last night, he needs to do a little bit more. And I think the amount of fixtures they've had and the squad struggling a little bit with injuries at the moment as well, I think it told towards the end. They looked a bit tired, but I do think the best team went through.
Gemma, there was a constant theme in commentary last night talking about Rangers being exposed a lot at the back, at corners and set plays. Indeed, that's how their goal, the Benfica goal, came about. Was that evident to you? And what could Rangers have done to try and stop that?
It's interesting because you listen to Philippe and you listen to Jack Butland post-match, and they were both asked this question. There's an interesting answer in that Jack Butland kind of hinted at the fact that they had been working specifically on corners in terms of an attacking threat. They thought that was an opportunity. And I guess it plays to Rory's point. When you play against a quality opposition like Benfica, you have to roll the dice at some point. And probably that was them rolling the dice, focusing on putting bodies up there, really trying to make a breakthrough there and believing that they could deal with the counter-attack threat. Now, prior to the goal, they were given a warning and they didn't really heed that warning. And when you look at who you're playing against, Di Maria, who's been involved in the last 4 goals that Benfica have scored in the Europa League, the quality of Silva, not just his finish, but his timing of his run and his connection to Di Maria, It was a gamble, I think, that just didn't pay off on the night. But across the pieces, as Rory's demonstrated, Rangers have done themselves no disservice in these two games. You look at the two squads, you look at the two teams, the quality level across Benfica versus Rangers is higher. I think everybody would admit that. And also in terms of Rangers, their impact players from the bench unfortunately didn't make an impact. Cantwell coming on, Roofe coming on, didn't really inspire or spark any sort of comeback. And as Rory's alluded to, as soon as Benfica got their noses in front, it almost took the wind out of Rangers' sails. And even on a wet March evening in European football in Ibrox, it was just too much for them to overcome.
Rory, Philippe Clement insists that this defeat will not affect his players in a negative way, but I just wonder, how easy is it to move on from a narrow defeat?
Yeah, I don't think they'll have any problem moving on. They've got so much to play for between now and the end of the season, and I think realistically, if you look at the teams that are left in the Europa League, I think it would be very, very difficult for Rangers to progress to the final like they did a couple of seasons ago. So they're top of the league by a couple of points, and they've got the Scottish Cup to play for as well. So I don't think, as Gemma's alluded to there, they did themselves a disservice last night. I thought they performed okay back to middle, just lacked a little bit up top. So I don't think there was enough in the game. You know, you look at Slavia Prague, who were in Rangers group, going to Liverpool and getting absolutely demolished. Now that's the type of result that could take the wind out your sails, and that's the type of club and standard that's left in the tournament. So Rangers did pretty well over the two legs, and showed Scottish football in a decent light against a very, very good side. So I don't think that this will affect the mood in the camp too much at all. It's a nice wee bonus to have, is what I would say. But come the end of the season, when it comes to lifting the Premier League trophy, Rangers might feel that their chances of doing that, and that being them, is slightly improved now that they're out of Europe.
Well, let's move on to this weekend's games, shall we? Celtic face St Johnstone, Gemma, at home on Saturday. They, of course, beat Livingston in the Cup last weekend, but they lost to Hearts in their last league game. A win and they will go top, albeit it could just be for 24 hours. But how important is it that Celtic try and exert the pressure back onto Rangers, who, of course, don't play until the Sunday?
Yeah, I think it's an opportunity, and it's more of a psychological opportunity that Celtic want to take. I mean, you look at the game against Hearts; they had opportunities against Hearts. It wasn't a despondent display. And then you look at the game against Livingston; they kind of huffed and puffed their way to a win. Brendan Rodgers wasn't overly illuminated in the post-match press conference. So I think that they've had a bit of time to regroup this week. They've got St Johnstone. You would argue that they're odds-on favourite to win that one. And if they do that, the kind of psychological shift from being chasing to the top to being on the top and handing that kind of baton back to Rangers to say you must get a result against a good Dundee team in a tough place to go, I think that would do Celtic wonders in this title race.
Rory, St Johnstone, of course, went to Celtic Park in August and they drew 0-0, didn't they? What chance of a similar result from their point of view this time around, do you think?
It's a difficult one because the blueprint, generally speaking, for teams like St Johnstone going to Celtic Park is the things you will hear all the time in this fixture. Defend deep, try and catch them on the counter, try and get your wing backs if you're playing a 3-5-2 up the pitch at some point, and then take your chances when they come along and soak up a lot of pressure. However, teams are scoring goals at Celtic Park. My concern would be if St Johnstone got the quality to go there and hurt Celtic. I'm not quite sure. But that being said, I did think the same against Livingston last week, and they managed to do it. I think Celtic will have too much. I think the fact that they slipped up after Rangers lost a couple of weeks ago will be played on their minds. I don't see anything but a Celtic win tomorrow on that basis. However, if St Johnstone are still in the game come half-time, I was at the Livingston game last week, the home support become very jittery very quickly, especially given their team's up and down performances this season. So it's certainly one to watch, but I do think that Celtic will have too much, and if Maeda is in the form he was in last week, then he's going to be hard to stop. And Nicholas Kuhn as well, to be fair to him, for 60 minutes last week, especially the first half actually, was outstanding. So they just need to be a little bit more solid at the back. They're really missing Cameron Carter-Vickers, I have to say.
It's Kilmarnock against St Mirren, and that battle for fourth place, Gemma, is really hotting up, just at a point between the sides. This one's pretty close to call, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it is, and it's really interesting when you say like we're fourth place St Mirren versus fifth place Kilmarnock. The two teams, like both managers, have done exceptionally well there. So it's going to be a really exciting match, and I do think it's probably slightly too hard to call based on the way both teams are playing at this moment in time. So I'm not going to sit on the fence, but it might be a draw.
Well, the big question is, will Hibs get another draw? They seem to be the draw specialists at the moment. They're at home to Livingston. Rory, how do you see that one going? Livy, of course, they desperately need to start racking up the points, don't they, somehow?
Yeah, they do, and I have to say that a couple of weeks ago I probably would have given Livingston no chance, but having watched them at Celtic Park last week, they were superb. They really, really were. Tete Yengi, the striker they've brought in last week, was unbelievable up front. That lone striker role at Parkhead can be a lonely, lonely place. Trust me, I've been there. And you're running, you're doing doggies between defenders, and you're just getting no joy. He held the ball up. He took advantage of every situation that came his way, and my goodness, his finish was top notch. So, given their performance last week and the fact that Hibs suffered a little bit of disappointment during the week, I think Livingston can go there and get something. I really do. I just think that the nature of that performance last week, they looked a threat on the counter-attack, and no disrespect to Hibs, they're not playing against the quality of Celtic. What I do think Livingston need to have is that cup attitude, though, that nothing to lose attitude, because they seem a little bit like the shackles are on in the league because they know their position's so precarious. I think if they can go there with the same mindset and attitude as they did last week, I think they could maybe nick. I don't think they'll get all three, but I think they can nick a point out the game, Jane.
Well, all eyes have been on Aberdeen recently, Gemma. They go to Motherwell this weekend. Motherwell, I think it's fair to say, are looking upwards now. The Dons are desperate to bounce back after that defeat against Dundee midweek. It's interesting times at Aberdeen, but how do you think it's all going to be affecting the players? Because they too need to start getting results together, don't they?
So it was just they didn't show up against Dundee. Dundee, to be fair, played really well. McCowan and Cameron were excellent, but Aberdeen they were posted missing. And this is a really interesting one. I was thinking about this during the week, and you listen to Peter Leaven post match talking about how we need to go and get 3 points. Now you must get 3 points. You must get 3 points. You are literally 3 points behind Ross County, who get a bit of momentum from that draw against Hibs, and now they've got the bit between the teeth because it's tangible. I can reach up to 10th place if Aberdeen don't perform against Motherwell, who are bouncing off the back of a great win against Rangers. And how do you change that mindset in the players? Because players should be and will be scared where they are. A scared player going into match knowing he must do something is not a good position to be in. So they've got Peter Leaven's got a decision to make. You either hammer home the fact that you must turn up now. If you don't turn up now, it's going to be dangerous, and you could be the team that is the first Aberdeen team ever to be relegated from the top flight. Or you try and take that pressure off the players and you say, right, what's happened before has happened before. We've got X amount of games left in the league. Let's go out and enjoy them. Go out and enjoy your football. Go out and play. Those are the two options that you've got. The second one's a dangerous one. The first one's also a dangerous one because all you're doing is heaping more pressure on players to perform. And when you tell people they must perform, the likelihood is that they won't necessarily reach the level that they need to get to. So I think it's a fascinating psychological piece that Aberdeen have got to go through here, because the footballing piece, you don't automatically become terrible footballers. That doesn't happen. But what happens is you get so constrained by the fear and the prospect of what you must achieve that you become so tense and you can't actually perform and deliver. So I think that the whole Aberdeen, the remainder of the Aberdeen season plays to the psychology and how Peter Leaven manages to manage that psychology within that team. Not so much around about what kind of we're going to go back on the pitch and work through the game. The guys know how to play football. So this for me is a really interesting one with that.
I think they're in deep, deep trouble, Gemma. I really do.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. but they're not out of it yet. So if you're going into that club, you've got to find a way to switch it. And how do you find that way to switch it?
I've been in that relegation battle before, and it's exactly everything you've just spoken through there. But I just think Aberdeen have got shades of the Hibs relegation season. I really do, where they just drop like a stone, and nobody expects them to get relegated. And just before they know it, they've run out of games. And it's an unbelievable position that they're in, given that they were in Europe last season. But I worry for Aberdeen, I really do.
You say you've been in that position before, Rory, and Gemma's talking about how the players cope with this mentally more than anything else. How do you cope with it mentally? What do you do as a player?
Well, it's not easy, and all the points that Gemma make are very, very true and relevant. It's. I went to St Mirren halfway through the season, and they were stranded at the bottom of the Championship, and we managed to gain a little bit of momentum with a few wins, but we had a right good squad actually in the end. But I've also been in the position down in England where I was fighting relegation from League One, and during one of the spells at Dundee where we're going through a rough patch as well, and as Gemma quite rightly says, it's trying to get it out your head, that pressure. And that's pretty much what I said about Livingston. Livingston were a different team last week because they were playing in the Cup, and it's that mindset of, right, we've nothing to lose, the shackles are off type thing. But then trying to implement that mindset when you really have to win is much more difficult. So Peter Leven's got a real job in his hands, and to be honest, Jane, I would just be repeating a lot of what Gemma said with regards to how he's got to handle that and how the players have got to handle that.
Let's look at the remaining two fixtures from the weekend. Ross County hosting Hearts. A win for County and defeat for the Dons. As you said earlier, Gemma, would see them level on points. Is that a realistic something that Ross County can achieve, do you think?
Don's done well since he's taken over. They've managed to get a point off Hibs last week, showing a battling spirit towards the end, and they crafted a really good goal at the end to draw it. Hearts are flying a little bit, so they're performing really well. But Ross County is never an easy place to go and pick up points. So I think Hearts probably will have a bit too much for Ross County, but I think that it's going to be difficult for them up there.
And finally, Rory, two of your old teams, Dundee against Rangers, going head-to-head on Sunday. How do you see that one going?
Well, it's difficult to call because Dundee are a very, very good side. They're sitting sixth in the league, quite rightly so, but they are susceptible to the odd hammering, shall we say, when they don't perform in these games. Rangers beat them 5-0 at Dens Park, Celtic took 7 off them at Celtic Park, so Tony Docherty will be very aware of that. So I think you might see a slightly more defensive setup than you normally would from Tony Docherty, just to avoid any potential heavy scoreline. But Dundee have got the players in their ranks to really, really hurt teams. Lyle Cameron's excellent. Luke McCowan, Bakayoko on his day is very, very good as well. And they've got an experienced backline. They're not going to win any medals for the old playing out from the back and all the rest of it, some of the players at Dundee, but my goodness, they defend their box really, really well. And they've got a good goalkeeper in Trevor Carson as well. So Rangers coming off the back of last night, I genuinely don't think there'll be much disappointment. I think they've went out to a very good side, very narrowly over 2 legs. I think you can stomach that, you can deal with that. It's not ideal, you don't want to go out of Europe, but it's happened. And they move on to Dens. I'll be there. I'm looking forward to the game. And I think it is a tough one to call, but I just think the quality that Rangers have got and the motivation they've got to go and win the game, I think they might win it by the odd goal.
This is the Scottish Football Podcast.
Well, finally, it's the opening rounds of post-split fixtures in the SWPL this Sunday. Gemma, Celtic against Rangers. Obviously, that's the standout fixture, isn't it? And how significant a game do you think this one could be in terms of that title race?
Yeah, well, there's only 4 points separating Rangers and Celtic and also Glasgow City. It's funny, Lena Sutiko's been in about 3 months since as many Old Firm matches. She started with one and they just keep coming thick and fast. The last one was... It could have gone either way, ended up in a draw, but they both come off healthy Scottish Cup quarter-final victories at the weekend. So it's going to be really interesting. It's both, to be fair, most of the games this season in terms of Glasgow and Rangers have been exceptionally tight. Both of them are playing really nice attacking football. And when it comes to the goal scores, often slight defensive mistakes, perhaps a referee decision going the wrong way as well. So really interested. I'm looking forward to watching that on Sunday.
Yeah, we're both at that one, aren't we? Glasgow City against Hearts is another significant fixture as well. Of course, they won't have it their own way, City, but they are on terrific form, aren't they?
They are. They weren't in the cup, so they've had some rest and recuperation, which is always much welcome from players at the tail end of a season, getting some time to refresh the body, not just the body, but the mind as well. So, I mean, they're playing Hearts there. It's a tricky pitch, as we know. It's a different pitch, but I don't think that would cause too much problems. And I think Glasgow City will edge this one. I don't think it'll be convincing win. I don't think we're going to get a lot of goals in it, but a 1 or 2-0 victory, I think, for Glasgow City.
Well, that's all we've got time for. My thanks to Rory Loy and Gemma Fay for their time, and thank you very much for listening. Dunfermline against Dundee United is another massive game in the Championship, and that's live for you on BBC Scotland this evening from 7:30. Celtic against Rangers in the SWPL will be on BBC Alapa from 4 o'clock on Sunday. We'll have the highlights on Monday night on BBC Scotland from that one for you as well. Sports Sound on BBC Radio Scotland will have all the live action covered for you across the weekend, and Sports Scene will have the highlights on Saturday, Sunday and Monday evenings. Enjoy your football this weekend. Bye-bye for now.
The Scotland Rugby podcast is now available every Tuesday. Join me, Andy Burke and Tom English. Just head to BBC Sounds and subscribe to the Scotland Rugby podcast.
It's just seismic stuff.
There's bucket hats as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Is this a rugby podcast or is this a fashion podcast?
Why can't it be a bit of both?
Rugby. Let's get on to rugby.
There's a lot to be excited about.
Today's guest, John McGuigan.
Clubs are at the absolute bedrock of everything Scottish rugby's about.
The Rugby Sports Sound podcast from BBC Radio Scotland.
You cannot help but be so excited.
It's going to be the centre of the rugby universe.
BBC Sounds.